Built under pressure. Introduction. Life was never designed to spare you. This must be understood at the outset, for upon this single fact rests the peace or misery of the human soul. Those who enter life expecting ease, protection, or exemption from difficulty will inevitably be disappointed, and disappointment, when misunderstood, hardens into bitterness, fear, and rebellion against existence itself. Life does not exist to preserve comfort. It exists to build strength. These truths are not modern opinions, nor are they born of optimism or despair. They arise from a body of spiritual realism articulated long before the present age, and clearly expressed in the early 20th century by Henry Thomas Hamblin, a British philosopher and spiritual writer working in the aftermath of industrial upheaval, social dislocation, and global war. Hamblin did not write from abstraction. He wrote in an era when illusions of progress had collapsed, when suffering could no longer be explained away, and when men were forced to confront the limits of comfort, belief, and human control. His work belongs to a lineage of Stoic Christianity and metaphysical law, not to escapist spirituality. He rejected promises of ease and exposed the deeper purpose behind adversity. What follows stands firmly within that tradition. From the moment man becomes conscious of himself as an individual, he is brought into conflict with circumstance, with limitation, with loss, with uncertainty, and above all, with himself. This is not an accident nor a failure of some imagined divine plan. It is the plan. The discipline of life cannot be avoided. No prayer, belief, philosophy, or method can remove it. No spiritual understanding exempts a man from it. Those who promise otherwise speak falsely, whether through ignorance or deception. Life does not ask whether you approve of its methods. It proceeds according to law. And the law is this: only that which resists becomes strong. Everything that grows must push against opposition. Everything that endures must pass through strain. That which is never tested remains undeveloped, weak, and dependent. Man alone imagines that he should be an exception. When difficulty appears, most assume something has gone wrong. They ask why life has turned against them, why effort is not rewarded with ease, why suffering appears where they expected progress. They conclude that life is unjust, hostile, or cruel. In doing so, they reveal not insight, but immaturity. Life does not break men in order to destroy them. It breaks them to expose what they are resting upon. So long as a man relies upon circumstances, upon other people, upon health, position, plans, or personal strength, life will allow him to do so until the moment arrives when those supports must be removed. That moment comes to all. It comes quietly to some, violently to others, but it comes without exception. When it arrives, the finite self fails. This failure is not a punishment. It is a revelation. There is a point in every life where effort ceases to be sufficient, where intelligence no longer provides answers, where endurance alone cannot carry the burden. At that point, something within must either awaken, or the man must collapse inwardly and be defeated by his own resistance. Many do collapse. They harden themselves against life, blame fate, resent circumstance, and cling desperately to what has already failed them. Such men do not overcome difficulty. They are submerged by it, not because difficulty is too great, but because they refuse to relinquish a false idea of themselves. Others, fewer in number, come to a different realization. They discover that the breaking point is not the end of power, but the beginning of it. They perceive, often dimly at first, that life is demanding a deeper foundation, one not built upon the shifting sands of external support, but upon something inward, stable, and inexhaustible. Only under pressure is this foundation revealed. The power that enables a man to overcome life does not belong to the surface personality. It does not arise from willpower, optimism, or emotional resolve. These fail precisely when they are needed most. The power that endures belongs to a deeper level of being, one that remains untouched by loss, fear, or change. This power cannot be given. It cannot be taught mechanically. It cannot be borrowed. It is discovered only when necessity compels the search. For this reason, life does not rescue men from their trials. Rescue would rob them of the very strength they require. To remove difficulty prematurely would be the greatest cruelty, for it would confirm dependence and arrest development. What appears as harshness is, in reality, precision. Life exacts its discipline with unerring accuracy. Those who submit to this discipline in the right spirit do not become weaker, but stronger. They do not become resigned, but inwardly free. Circumstances may still test them, but circumstances no longer rule them. They cease to ask whether life is fair and begin to understand that fairness is irrelevant where growth is concerned. This audiobook is not offered to those seeking relief from difficulty. It is offered to those seeking mastery over it. It does not promise an easier path. It reveals a firmer footing. It does not attempt to remove the storms of life. It shows how a man may become so rooted that storms lose their power to overthrow him. Life will continue to demand strength. The only question is whether that strength will be found. What breaks the unprepared awakens the mature. What crushes the dependent empowers the aligned. What appears as destruction is often initiation. To understand this is to pass from resistance into wisdom, from fear into stability, from helplessness into quiet authority. The discipline remains, but it no longer wounds, it shapes. In the chapters that follow, we shall examine why adversity is unavoidable, why it cannot be evaded without cost, and why those who accept its purpose rise, while those who resist it fall, not through belief, but through law, not through comfort, but through truth. Life does not intend to spare you. It intends to prepare you, and preparation is the first act of power. Chapter 1. The Law of Resistance. Resistance is not an obstacle placed in the path of life. It is the path. This must be understood clearly, for misunderstanding at this point gives rise to nearly all discouragement, bitterness, and rebellion against existence. Men imagine that resistance is evidence of failure, that difficulty signals error, and that opposition means they have taken a wrong direction. From this false assumption arises fear, doubt, and retreat. Life does not proceed by avoidance of resistance, but by its necessity. Everything that lives grows under pressure. The seed breaks its shell through resistance. The tree strengthens itself against the wind. Muscle develops only through strain. That which is never resisted remains weak, unstable, and dependent. And this is not cruelty, it is law. Man, however, resents the application of this law to himself. He expects progress without opposition, achievement without effort, and development without discomfort. When resistance appears, he concludes that life has turned against him. In truth, life has only begun to work upon him. Resistance reveals capacity. It exposes the measure of strength already present and summons forth that which lies dormant. Until resistance appears, latent power remains unused and unknown. Comfort never awakens power. Ease never demands growth. Only necessity compels discovery. For this reason, life does not remove resistance from the path of man. It increases it in exact proportion to his readiness. When greater strength is required, greater opposition appears. When deeper stability is needed, more severe tests arise. Life does not test indiscriminately, it tests precisely. The untrained soul collapses under resistance because it seeks to overcome by means that are insufficient. It relies upon will, emotion, intellect, or favorable circumstance. These may carry a man a short distance, but they cannot sustain him when resistance deepens. When they fail, he concludes that life itself is hostile. The error lies not in life, but in identification. So long as man identifies himself as a creature dependent upon conditions, resistance must defeat him. Circumstances will always be stronger than a man who believes himself to be their product. He will rise when they are favorable and fall when they are adverse. His strength will be borrowed, and borrowed strength never endures. Resistance destroys borrowed strength. It strips away all that is not intrinsic. It removes false supports, exposes the weakness of the foundation, and forces a reckoning. This is why resistance feels like breaking. It is not breaking the soul, it is breaking the illusion upon which the soul has relied. Many mistake this moment for ruin. When plans collapse, health fails, relationships dissolve, or security is withdrawn, the cry arises that life is unjust. But life has merely withdrawn what was never permanent, in order that man may discover what is. There exists within man a strength that does not depend upon circumstances. It is not affected by loss, delay, or opposition. It does not rise and fall with success or failure. This strength belongs to his deeper identity, his union with the infinite life from which he draws being. This strength cannot be accessed by avoiding resistance. It is revealed only through it. Therefore, resistance is not an enemy, but a summons. It calls man inward. It demands that he relinquish reliance upon the finite and establish himself upon the infinite. It refuses to be conquered by the tools of the surface self and insists upon deeper alignment. When this demand is met, resistance ceases to crush and begins to fortify. The same resistance that overwhelms one man stabilizes another. The difference lies not in the nature of the difficulty, but in the ground upon which the man stands. One resists life, the other aligns with it. One fights against the law, the other yields to it and draws strength from it. Yielding here does not mean passivity or resignation. It means recognition. It is the acknowledgement that life is governed by intelligence and purpose, not chance or cruelty. It is the surrender of self-will to a higher order, and in that surrender true power is found. Resistance cannot be conquered by force. It yields only to understanding. When man ceases to ask why resistance exists and begins to ask what it requires of him, a change takes place. He no longer wastes strength in rebellion. He conserves it for transformation. He no longer demands that life change, he permits himself to change. At this point, resistance becomes an ally. It shapes character, deepens perception, and stabilizes will. It teaches endurance without hardness and courage without arrogance. It removes fear by repeated exposure and repeated survival. What once threatened now strengthens. This is why those who have passed through great resistance possess a quiet authority. They do not boast of strength, for they know its source. They do not fear difficulty, for they understand its function. They are not exempt from trial, but they are no longer undone by it. Life continues to apply resistance until this understanding is attained. If resisted blindly, it returns with greater force. If met intelligently, it accomplishes its purpose and withdraws. The lesson is never punishment, it is preparation. He who understands this law ceases to flee difficulty and ceases also to seek it. He accepts it when it comes, knowing that it brings exactly what is required for the next stage of growth. He neither complains nor glorifies suffering. He recognizes it as discipline. Resistance is the price of strength. There is no other currency. To reject resistance is to reject development. To demand ease is to choose weakness. To submit intelligently to the law of resistance is to enter upon the path of power. Life does not break men to destroy them. It breaks them to discover whether they are willing to become strong. Only those who answer this demand endure. Chapter 2. Why difficulty separates the strong from the weak. Difficulty does not create weakness, it reveals it. This distinction is essential, for many attribute their collapse to the severity of circumstances, believing that life has demanded more than they were capable of giving. They conclude that they were overmatched, unfairly tested, or burdened beyond measure. In doing so, they mistake exposure for injury. Life never demands more than the soul can meet. What fails under pressure was never sufficient to begin with. Difficulty acts as a separator. It draws a clear line between what is real and what is assumed, between borrowed strength and intrinsic power, between the personality that imitates confidence and the soul that possesses it. When difficulty increases, pretense falls away. What remains is truth. The weak are not those who suffer. They are those who refuse discipline. Weakness is not a condition of circumstance but of attitude. It arises when man insists that life should accommodate him rather than form him. Such a one regards difficulty as injustice, resistance as hostility, and suffering as proof of error. He expends his remaining strength in protest, complaint, and self-pity, and thus deprives himself of the very power by which difficulty might be overcome. Resistance intensifies where resistance is opposed. Life responds to rebellion with repetition. Lessons unlearned are not abandoned. They are reapplied in stronger form. What are evaded returns? What is resisted persists. What is misunderstood deepens. This is not vengeance, it is precision. The weak soul seeks relief. The strong soul seeks understanding. The former asks how to escape. The latter asks how to stand. One looks outward for rescue, the other inward for alignment. One demands exemption, the other accepts responsibility. The result is inevitable. Those who demand relief grow more dependent. Each concession weakens them further, each avoidance lowers tolerance. Eventually, even minor resistance appears overwhelming. Life seems increasingly cruel, not because it has changed, but because the soul has not grown. Those who accept discipline grow stable. Each trial enlarges capacity. Each difficulty builds endurance. Resistance ceases to surprise them, for they have learned its function. Life does not grow gentler, but they grow firmer. This is why two men may face the same adversity and emerge utterly different. One is broken and resentful. The other is clarified and strengthened. The event is identical. The outcome is determined entirely by the inner posture with which it is met. Difficulty does not honor excuses. It does not inquire into background, intention, or desire. It measures only readiness. Where readiness is lacking, collapse follows. Where readiness exists, elevation occurs. This is the impartiality of law. Many mistake collapse for defeat. In truth, collapse often marks the end of false support. When a man can no longer maintain the structures by which he has lived, his image, his strategies, his self-concepts, he stands exposed. At this moment, he may either reconstruct the same structure and fail again, or he may relinquish it entirely and discover a deeper foundation. Most choose reconstruction. They rebuild with greater effort what was already insufficient. They double their will, sharpen their intellect, intensify their emotions, and repeat the same pattern with renewed determination. When it fails again, they blame fate. Few choose relinquishment. Relinquishment is misunderstood as surrender, yet it is the first act of real strength. It is the recognition that the source of failure lies not in effort, but in orientation. It is the quiet admission that one has been living on the surface instead of the center. Only here does true strength begin. The strong soul is not distinguished by force, aggression, or domination. It is distinguished by alignment. It does not oppose life. It cooperates with its laws. It does not seek to overpower resistance. It absorbs it and grows. It does not insist upon outcomes. It establishes itself in principle. Such a soul is unhurried. It does not demand immediate relief or visible progress. It understands that formation precedes manifestation. Strength accumulates inwardly long before it appears outwardly. What is being built is not circumstance, but capacity. This inward construction is invisible to others and often to the soul itself. There are periods when no improvement can be detected, when effort seems fruitless and endurance unrewarded. These periods are decisive. They test whether the soul will remain faithful to law without encouragement. Those who endure these seasons emerge changed. They do not announce transformation. They simply cease to be shaken. Where once resistance produced anxiety, it now produces attention. Where once difficulty provoked fear, it now provokes stillness. The soul has learned to stand without support. At this stage, life begins to entrust greater responsibility. Not because the soul has demanded it, but because it has demonstrated readiness. Strength is always entrusted, never granted. Authority follows stability, not ambition. Those who cannot govern themselves under pressure cannot be trusted with influence, freedom, or power. This is why life withholds advancement from many who desire it. Their desire is sincere, but their foundation is unstable. Advancement would magnify weakness rather than cure it. Life delays not to punish, but to protect the integrity of development. The strong soul does not envy those who appear untested. It knows that an exemption is not a favor. It knows that unused capacity atrophies. It knows that those spared difficulty are merely postponed, not privileged. All must pass through discipline. The timing differs, the law does not. Difficulty separates the strong from the weak by revealing who is willing to be formed. Those who submit intelligently become capable of bearing life without complaint and without fear. Those who resist blindly become increasingly fragile. The difference is not moral, it is structural. Strength is structure. And structure is built only where resistance is met, endured, and understood. Life does not choose whom to break. It reveals who is willing to be made strong. Chapter 3. The Breaking Point as Initiation. There comes a moment in every life when effort is no longer sufficient. This moment is not announced. It arrives quietly for some and violently for others, but it is unmistakable when it comes. Strategies that once worked fail. Strength that once sufficed proves inadequate. Confidence evaporates. The individual discovers that he has reached the limit of what the finite self can provide. This is the breaking point. It is widely misunderstood, feared, and resisted. Most regard it as a catastrophe, evidence of failure, or the final proof that life is hostile. They believe something has gone irreparably wrong. In truth, nothing has gone wrong. Something has reached its appointed end. The breaking point is not collapse, it is transition. It marks the boundary between two modes of living. On one side stands the life governed by self-will, personal strength, and external support. On the other stands a life governed by alignment with a deeper power. One cannot cross this boundary without the former failing. Life does not permit passage while illusions remain intact. So long as man believes that he can manage existence by intelligence alone, by effort alone, or by favorable circumstance alone, he is not ready for deeper authority. Such beliefs must be exhausted, not argued away. Life, therefore, arranges conditions under which they are rendered useless. This exhaustion feels like loss. The individual experiences it as disorientation, helplessness, and fear. He may feel stripped, exposed, or abandoned. Yet what has been removed is not strength, but false reliance. The scaffolding has been taken away so that the structure may stand on its own. Those who mistake this moment for destruction retreat. They cling desperately to what has failed, attempting to restore former conditions. They double their effort, intensify their struggle, and force themselves onward. When resistance increases, they interpret it as further injustice. Their suffering multiplies because they refuse the passage that is being offered. Others pause. They recognize, often without fully understanding, that something essential is being demanded. They cease struggling outwardly and turn inward. They do not attempt to escape the breaking point. They remain within it. This decision, though quiet, is decisive. The breaking point is an initiation. It is the moment at which life demands a deeper identity. The surface personality, constructed from habit, fear, ambition, and imitation, can go no further. A choice must be made: either retreat into bitterness and limitation, or advance into unknown strength. Initiation is never comfortable. It requires the surrender of familiar forms of control. It demands trust where proof is absent. It asks man to stand without the assurances that once sustained him. This is why so few pass through willingly. Most prefer the known misery to the unknown stability. Yet those who endure discover something essential. They find that beneath the failing will, beneath the exhausted intellect, beneath the collapsing emotions, there exists a presence that does not fail. This presence is not dramatic. It does not announce itself with feeling or excitement. It is quiet, steady, and impersonal. It simply remains. This is the foundation of real power. It does not argue with circumstance. It does not resist difficulty. It does not seek validation. It acts without haste and endures without strain. Those who touch this level of being recognize, often with astonishment, that they are not as fragile as they believed. The breaking point reveals what cannot be broken. Once this discovery is made, life is never again approached in the same way. Fear loses its authority, not because danger disappears, but because identity has shifted. The individual no longer believes himself to be upheld by conditions. He knows himself to be upheld by something deeper. From this point forward, resistance no longer threatens annihilation. It still tests, it still presses, but it no longer terrifies. The soul has learned that the collapse of form does not mean the collapse of being. It has learned that what endures does not depend upon what changes. This is why initiation is irreversible. One may forget, neglect, or resist its implications, but the knowledge remains. Once the deeper ground has been touched, the surface life can never again be mistaken for the whole. A man may still suffer, but he no longer believes suffering to be final. The breaking point also marks the end of the complaint. Those who have passed through it do not argue with life. They do not demand explanations or exemptions. They have learned that life is not to be negotiated with, but understood. Their questions change from "why is this happening?" to "what is required of me now?" This change of question changes everything. Initiation confers responsibility. It does not make life easier, but it makes the individual capable. Greater demands may follow, not fewer. The difference is that demands are no longer interpreted as threats. They are recognized as invitations to further development. Life entrusts nothing to those who have not been initiated. Authority, stability, and influence are given only to those who have stood at the breaking point and refused to retreat. This is not favoritism, it is a necessity. Power without initiation destroys the unprepared. Those who pass through do not speak often of it. Initiation is inward, its signs are subtle. It reveals itself not in words, but in presence. Such individuals are marked by calm under pressure, clarity in confusion, and restraint where others panic. They do not dramatize difficulty, nor do they seek admiration for endurance. They have learned the law. The breaking point is not where life ends, it is where the false self ends. What remains is not perfection, but solidity, not invulnerability, but groundedness, not an exemption from trial, but immunity to despair. Life breaks men only until it finds something that does not break. When it does, initiation is complete. Chapter 4. The inner power that appears only under pressure. There exists within man a power that remains unknown until necessity compels its discovery. This power is not an extension of human will, nor is it a refinement of intellect or emotion. It does not arise from effort, discipline, or positive thinking. It belongs to a deeper order of being, and it remains inaccessible so long as the surface self is sufficient for survival. Comfort conceals it, security delays it, success postpones it. Only pressure reveals it. Life does not entrust this power lightly. Were it available without preparation, it would be misused, distorted, or wasted. Man would employ it for personal advantage, domination, or escape from discipline. Therefore, it remains dormant until lesser powers fail. This failure is not accidental, it is the key. When will collapses, when intellect reaches its limit, when emotional strength is exhausted, the soul stands exposed. At this point, one of two things occurs. Either the individual sinks into fear and helplessness, or he becomes still. In that stillness, something new becomes perceptible. This power does not announce itself. It does not surge with emotion or produce immediate relief. It is quiet, impersonal, and steady. It does not struggle against resistance. It stands within it. It does not seek to control circumstances. It remains independent of them. Those who encounter it often fail at first to recognize its significance. It lacks drama. It does not flatter. It does not excite. Yet it endures when everything else has fallen away. This power is not personal. It does not belong to the finite self, the personality, or the constructed identity. It flows through the individual rather than originating from him. It is accessed not by assertion, but by alignment. One does not command it, one yields to it. This yielding is not weakness. It is the relinquishment of self-will in favor of a greater order. It is the recognition that life is governed by intelligence beyond personal preference. When this recognition is made sincerely, the inner power becomes available. Pressure enforces sincerity. So long as a man believes that he can manage life by his own resources, surrender remains theoretical. Under pressure, theory collapses. The individual is forced to choose between rebellion and alignment. If rebellion is chosen, pressure increases. If alignment is chosen, resistance loses its destructive edge. This power does not remove difficulty. It does something far more significant. It stabilizes the one who faces it. Circumstances may remain severe. Loss may not be restored. Uncertainty may persist. Yet the individual no longer feels diminished by these conditions. He has found a ground that does not shift with events. This is why pressure precedes empowerment. Without pressure, there is no incentive to relinquish false independence. Without pressure, surrender remains a concept rather than an act. Without pressure, the deeper power remains theoretical, unused, and unknown. Life, therefore, applies pressure with precision. It does not crush indiscriminately. It presses exactly where false reliance exists. Where attachment is strongest, pressure is greatest. Where dependence is deepest, resistance is most severe. Life is not cruel, it is exact. Many misinterpret this exactness as persecution. They believe that life singles them out, burdens them unfairly, or withholds relief deliberately. In truth, life is working to expose the precise point at which transformation is required. The pressure is not random, it is corrective. The inner power does not emerge through effort. Effort belongs to the finite self. This power emerges through cessation of struggle, not passivity, but stillness, not resignation, but acceptance. When the individual stops fighting reality and begins to stand within it, the power flows unobstructed. This standing is not inactive, it is alert, attentive, and responsive. The individual acts when action is required and waits when waiting is required. He no longer acts from fear or urgency. His movements are fewer but more exact. His decisions are quieter but more stable. Those who rely upon this power are often misunderstood. They are not driven, yet they endure. They are not forceful, yet they prevail. They do not rush, yet they arrive. Observers mistake their calm for indifference or weakness. Only those who have stood under pressure recognize the source of their stability. This power cannot be accumulated. It is not stored or hoarded. It is present only in alignment. The moment self-will reasserts itself, the flow diminishes. The moment fear returns, obstruction appears. The individual must remain oriented inwardly, moment by moment. This requirement keeps the soul humble. Power that depends upon alignment cannot inflate the ego. It does not permit domination or exploitation. It cannot be used against life, only with it. When misuse is attempted, the power withdraws. Thus, life safeguards itself. The inner power strengthens only those who seek harmony rather than control. It supports those who accept discipline rather than evade it. It sustains those who are willing to be shaped rather than gratified. Pressure is therefore not the enemy of power, it is its condition. Those who flee pressure remain uninitiated. Those who endure pressure without understanding suffer unnecessarily. Those who meet pressure intelligently discover a strength that does not fail. Life applies pressure until this discovery is made. When it is made, pressure may continue, but it no longer breaks, it consolidates. The soul has found its center, and from that center, life can be met without fear. Chapter 5. Why Life Refuses to Rescue You. Life does not intervene to spare man from difficulty. This is not indifference nor absence of care. It is intelligence. Rescue, as man conceives it, would interrupt development and confirm dependence. Therefore it is withheld. Many approach life as though it were obligated to protect them from pain. They believe that sincerity, effort, belief, or prayer should entitle them to exemption. When relief does not arrive, they conclude that life is unjust or unresponsive. They do not realize that the refusal to rescue is the operation of a higher mercy. Life rescues no one from the discipline necessary for strength. An intervention that removes difficulty without removing dependence leaves the individual weaker than before. He survives, but he does not mature. He becomes increasingly reliant upon external support and increasingly unable to stand alone. This is not salvation, it is postponement. For this reason, life allows the consequences of weakness to be felt. It does not soften the law to accommodate immaturity. It does not suspend discipline in response to distress. It applies the same principles to all, without exception. The appearance of harshness arises only when the law is misunderstood. Man seeks rescue because he fears collapse. He believes that without immediate relief, he will be destroyed. This belief reveals a lack of trust in the deeper power of life. It assumes that survival depends upon conditions rather than alignment. So long as this belief persists, rescue would only reinforce error. He therefore remains silent. This silence is often mistaken for abandonment. In truth, it is an invitation to discover a source of stability that does not depend upon intervention. When the individual ceases to plead for relief and begins to seek understanding, the silence becomes intelligible. Rescue is replaced by support of a different order. This support does not alter circumstances directly. It strengthens perception, steadies emotion, and clarifies action. It does not remove the burden, it increases the capacity to bear it. Under this influence, what once appeared unbearable becomes manageable. Life assists growth, not escape. Those who look for rescue remain children in consciousness. They demand that life conform to their needs rather than that they rise to meet its demands. Such an attitude cannot produce strength, no matter how sincere the desire for relief may be. Life does not respond to demand. It responds to readiness. Readiness is demonstrated by the willingness to endure without resentment, to act without certainty, and to remain aligned without reassurance. Where this willingness exists, support appears, not as rescue but as empowerment. The refusal to rescue exposes motive. Those who seek relief for the sake of comfort lose heart when relief does not come. Those who seek understanding remain. They recognize that difficulty has a purpose beyond immediate alleviation. They accept the delay, not with resignation, but with attention. This attention changes the nature of suffering. When difficulty is resisted, suffering multiplies. When it is observed, understood, and accepted, suffering diminishes even if conditions remain unchanged. Pain may persist, but despair does not. The individual ceases to be at war with reality. At this stage, life no longer needs to be rescued. The soul has learned to stand without intervention. It has discovered that collapse is not annihilation, and that endurance is possible without guarantees. This discovery marks a significant maturation. Many prayers go unanswered because they seek rescue rather than transformation. They ask for the removal of conditions instead of the removal of dependence. They ask for a change in circumstance rather than a change in orientation. Life cannot grant such requests without betraying its own purpose. True assistance operates inwardly. It aligns the individual with the law, not against it. It teaches cooperation rather than avoidance. It strengthens character rather than preserving comfort. Those who receive this form of assistance recognize it not by dramatic change, but by increased steadiness. They become less reactive. They cease to demand immediate outcomes. They act with patience and restraint. They are no longer thrown into confusion by delay or opposition. They understand that timing belongs to life, not to desire. This understanding ends the illusion of rescue. The individual no longer waits to be saved, he waits to be formed. He no longer measures progress by relief, but by stability. He does not ask whether the difficulty will end, but whether he is meeting it rightly. Life responds to this shift with trust. Greater responsibility is given. More complex challenges appear. The soul is no longer shielded from pressure because it no longer needs to be. It has demonstrated the capacity to endure without disintegration. Rescue would now be interference. Life does not interfere with growth. Those who have passed this stage often appear unsupported. Others wonder how they continue without visible help. The truth is that help has been internalized. What was once sought externally is now present inwardly. This is why life refuses to rescue. It intends not to carry man, but to establish him. Not to remove the load, but to strengthen the bearer. Not to eliminate difficulty, but to produce mastery. Rescue belongs to infancy. Endurance belongs to maturity. Life is concerned with the latter. When the soul understands this, pleading ceases, resentment dissolves, and fear diminishes. The individual no longer feels abandoned. He recognizes that life has never withdrawn support, only illusion. Life does not rescue because rescue is unnecessary once alignment is achieved. What remains is discipline, responsibility, and quiet power. And these are sufficient. Chapter 6. Fate, Discipline, and the Unavoidable Lesson. There are events in life that cannot be avoided. No effort of will, no rearrangement of circumstance, no appeal to belief can prevent their arrival. They come with certainty, and they depart only when their purpose has been fulfilled. These events are commonly referred to as fate, and they are widely misunderstood. Fate is not punishment, it is an instruction. Men imagine fate to be arbitrary, cruel, or blind. They speak of it as though it were an external force acting without reason or justice. In truth, fate is the exact operation of law upon character. It is the visible expression of causes long set in motion, and it arrives with neither malice nor mercy. What must be learned will be taught. The lesson may come gently or harshly. That difference is not determined by fate, but by the receptivity of the soul. Those who learn quickly require little pressure. Those who resist require much. Fate adjusts itself accordingly. This adjustment is precise. Life does not waste experience. It does not repeat without reason. When a lesson remains unlearned, it returns in another form, often intensified. When it is learned, repetition ceases. Fate withdraws the moment its work is complete. Most suffering persists because instruction is resisted. Men fight fate as though it were an enemy, not realizing that resistance increases its force. They seek to escape circumstances that are meant to shape them. They resent conditions that exist to refine them. In doing so, they prolong their own difficulty. Fate cannot be outwitted. It is not impressed by intelligence, bargaining, or despair. It proceeds until alignment is achieved. To oppose it is to exhaust oneself against immovable law. To submit intelligently is to shorten its course. Submission here does not mean resignation. It is not passive endurance or fatalistic acceptance. It is the recognition that life is governed by purpose and that this purpose is not hostile. When a man accepts discipline without resentment and seeks to understand rather than evade, fate loses its power to wound. At this point, discipline becomes education. The same event that once produced despair now produces insight. The same loss that once crushed now clarifies. The individual ceases to ask why fate has chosen him and begins to ask what is being required of him. This change of attitude alters everything. Fate continues to operate, but it no longer dominates consciousness. The soul no longer feels imprisoned by circumstance. It feels instructed by it. The pressure remains, but fear diminishes. The lesson proceeds without unnecessary suffering. Those who reach this stage are no longer victims of fate. They understand that fate is not something imposed from outside, but something cooperating from within. It is the means by which life brings character into harmony with law. It corrects deviation and strengthens capacity. This is why fate often strikes at points of attachment. Where identity is bound to position, fate removes position. Where security is bound to possession, fate removes possession. Where confidence is bound to approval, fate removes approval. It does not do so to impoverish the soul, but to free it from dependence. The removal feels violent only because the attachment is strong. Once attachment is relinquished, fate loses its severity. The lesson is learned, and repetition is unnecessary. Life moves on to the next requirement. Those who refuse to relinquish attachment experience fate as cruelty. They harden themselves against life, blame external forces, and seek relief through avoidance. Each attempt at avoidance tightens the lesson. Fate returns in a different form, often more severe, until the required adjustment is made. Life is patient but persistent. It does not abandon the soul to error. It continues instruction until harmony is restored. This persistence is often mistaken for hostility. In truth, it is fidelity to purpose. The unavoidable lesson is always inward. Circumstances are merely the means. What must change is orientation, not environment. When orientation changes, the environment follows. Until it does, fate continues its work. This is why no external solution can permanently resolve an internal misalignment. Changes of place, relationship, occupation, or belief may provide temporary relief, but they do not alter fate unless the underlying lesson is learned. Fate does not pursue the man, it accompanies the unlearned lesson wherever he goes. Freedom from fate is therefore not escape, but comprehension. When the soul understands the law it has violated and restores harmony willingly, fate no longer needs to compel correction. Discipline gives way to cooperation, instruction gives way to participation. At this stage, life becomes less dramatic, not because challenges cease, but because resistance has ended. The individual no longer experiences life as a series of assaults. He experiences it as a sequence of adjustments. Difficulty is met calmly, lessons are learned quickly, and fate does not linger. This is the mark of maturity. The mature soul does not argue with discipline. It accepts responsibility for alignment. It recognizes that suffering is not inflicted but incurred through resistance. It understands that fate is not an adversary but a teacher. Life does not apologize for fate. It does not explain itself in advance. It instructs through experience. Those who insist upon explanation before obedience delay their own liberation. Those who cooperate discover freedom where others perceive constraint. Fate remains unavoidable until it is understood. When it is understood, it no longer dominates. It becomes transparent. The soul passes through events without being imprisoned by them. It is shaped but not embittered, instructed but not diminished. This is the purpose of discipline, not to punish, but to produce alignment, not to crush, but to educate, not to imprison, but to liberate. Life teaches until harmony is restored, and when harmony is restored, fate has completed its work. Chapter 7. The transformation of suffering into strength. Suffering in itself possesses no virtue. This must be stated plainly, for many glorify pain as though endurance alone were evidence of growth. Suffering does not ennoble by its presence. It refines only when it is understood. When it is misunderstood, it degrades, hardens, and distorts character. Life does not seek to produce suffering, it seeks to produce strength. Suffering appears only where resistance exists. It is the friction created when the soul moves against the law. When alignment is absent, pressure generates pain. When alignment is restored, pressure educates without wounding. Thus, suffering is not a goal, but a signal. It indicates that something within is out of harmony. It points not to cruelty in life, but to misadjustment in consciousness. To curse suffering is therefore futile. It must be interpreted. Those who suffer blindly grow bitter. They endure hardship without insight, and the result is resentment, fear, or despair. Such suffering produces no strength. It weakens the will and narrows perception. The individual emerges diminished, not enlarged. Those who suffer intelligently grow firm. They do not seek pain, but when it comes, they attend to it. They observe its demand, examine its cause, and permit it to instruct. Their suffering is not wasted. It is transmuted. The difference lies in orientation. When suffering is met with self-pity, it contracts the soul. When met with attention, it expands it. When met with rebellion, it multiplies. When met with understanding, it dissolves. This transformation does not occur suddenly. There is often a period in which suffering appears meaningless, repetitive, and unjust. During this stage, the soul is being stripped of false explanations. Consolations fail, justifications collapse. The individual is left without a narrative or an excuse. This emptiness is necessary. So long as suffering can be explained away, its lesson remains obscured. Only when the soul stands without explanation does perception deepen. In this state, the individual no longer asks for relief but for clarity. Clarity transforms suffering. When the lesson becomes visible, pain loses its authority. The event may remain difficult, but it no longer dominates consciousness. The soul is no longer defined by what it endures, but by what it learns. Strength is born here. This strength is not hardness. It is not emotional numbness or indifference. It is stability. The individual becomes less reactive, less defensive, less desperate. He ceases to measure himself by circumstance and begins to measure himself by alignment. At this stage, suffering ceases to produce fear. It is recognized as temporary, functional, and instructive. The soul no longer panics at its appearance. It knows that suffering signals adjustment, not annihilation. This knowledge cannot be taught. It must be lived. It is acquired only through repeated exposure and repeated survival. Each encounter removes illusion. Each endurance clarifies identity. Over time, suffering loses its terror because its purpose has been proven. Those who have undergone this transformation exhibit a distinctive quality. They do not dramatize pain, nor do they deny it. They speak of difficulty without bitterness and of loss without despair. Their strength is quiet. It does not seek recognition. It does not argue its legitimacy. Such individuals are often mistaken for being untouched by suffering. The truth is the opposite. They have suffered deeply, but they have not allowed suffering to define them. They have permitted it to shape them instead. Suffering becomes strength when it produces detachment from illusion. Illusion binds identity to form, status, security, health, approval, outcome. When these are threatened, suffering intensifies. When attachment is released, suffering diminishes. The soul becomes free to endure change without collapse. This detachment is not withdrawal from life. It is participation without bondage. The individual continues to act, to care, and to engage, but without dependency. He gives without clinging and works without desperation. His strength lies in freedom from compulsion. Such freedom cannot exist without suffering having done its work. Where suffering has been avoided, strength remains theoretical. Where suffering has been indulged, bitterness replaces wisdom. Only where suffering has been understood does power emerge. Life, therefore, permits suffering until strength is formed. Once formed, suffering no longer needs to instruct. Life moves on to different demands. Pressure may continue, but it no longer produces pain of the same order. The soul has learned to stand. This standing marks a profound shift. The individual no longer experiences life as hostile. Even severe trials are met with composure. Fear diminishes because identity has stabilized. The soul knows it can endure without disintegration. This is the true fruit of suffering. Not endurance alone, but transformation. Not survival, but authority. Not patience, but understanding. Those who have reached this stage do not seek suffering, nor do they flee it. They accept it when necessary and release it when its purpose is complete. They do not build identity around pain. They do not use it as currency for sympathy or significance. They have moved beyond it. Suffering has completed its work. Strength now resides where suffering once ruled. The soul has been tempered. It no longer requires harsh correction. It responds to subtle adjustments. Life no longer needs to shout. A whisper suffices. This is maturity. The transformation of suffering into strength marks the end of one phase of development and the beginning of another. The soul is no longer formed primarily through pain, but through responsibility. Life entrusts more to those who have learned through suffering. Not because suffering is required indefinitely, but because strength has been established. The soul can now be shaped by duty rather than by distress. Suffering was the teacher. Strength is the result. And once the lesson is learned, the teacher withdraws. Chapter 8. Submission without defeat. Submission is one of the most misunderstood acts of the human soul. It is commonly equated with weakness, passivity, or surrender to defeat. Those who fear it imagine that to submit is to be diminished, to relinquish dignity, or to abandon strength. This misunderstanding arises from confusion between submission to life and submission to fear. The two are not the same. Submission to fear weakens. Submission to law empowers. Life does not demand capitulation, it demands alignment. When alignment is refused, resistance intensifies. When alignment is accepted, resistance loses its force. This acceptance is submission, not in the sense of yielding to oppression, but in the sense of consenting to reality. Reality cannot be overruled. Those who attempt to oppose it exhaust themselves. Those who attempt to manipulate it entangle themselves. Those who attempt to deny it fragment inwardly. Only those who recognize it and work within it gain authority. Submission is therefore an act of intelligence. It is the recognition that life is governed by order, not impulse. It is the acknowledgement that personal preference does not alter the law. When a man ceases to insist that life conform to him and begins to conform himself to life, a reversal takes place. Strength returns. This return is often mistaken for resignation. In truth, resignation belongs to despair. Submission belongs to understanding. The resigned soul gives up because it sees no alternative. The submitted soul yields because it recognizes a higher necessity. This distinction determines the outcome. Resignation produces stagnation. Submission produces movement. The one collapses inwardly, the other stabilizes and advances. The resigned soul becomes inert. The submitted soul becomes effective. Submission does not mean inaction. It does not excuse negligence, nor does it justify passivity. It clarifies action. When the individual no longer fights reality, energy previously wasted in resistance becomes available for response. Action becomes precise rather than frantic, deliberate rather than reactive. This precision marks maturity. Those who have learned submission act without struggle. They do not rush to impose solutions. They observe, assess, and respond. Their actions are fewer, but they are decisive. They no longer act to escape discomfort, but to fulfill a requirement. Such individuals are often mistaken for being compliant. In reality, they are ungovernable by circumstance because they no longer fight what must be endured. They cannot be coerced by fear. Because they no longer demand control, they cannot be destabilized by loss of it. Submission frees the will from futile conflict. The will is not destroyed, it is redirected. Instead of opposing the law, it cooperates with it. Instead of asserting preference, it seeks harmony. This redirection does not weaken the will, it purifies it. A purified will is formidable. It does not fluctuate with emotion. It does not depend upon the outcome. It remains steady under pressure and consistent over time. Such a will cannot be broken because it no longer contends with inevitability. This is why submission marks the end of defeat. Defeat occurs only when energy is expended against what cannot be changed. When this expenditure ceases, defeat becomes impossible. The individual may still face loss, delay, or limitation, but he is not defeated by them. He adapts. Adaptation is not compromise, it is intelligence in motion. It is the ability to adjust orientation without sacrificing integrity. The individual does not abandon principle, he abandons illusion. Those who refuse submission remain rigid. They cling to fixed ideas of how life should unfold. When reality diverges from these ideas, they experience shock, anger, and despair. Their rigidity prevents learning. Each challenge becomes a crisis. Those who submit remain flexible. They do not cling to forms. They understand that life is a process, not preservation. When conditions change, they adjust without panic. Their stability lies not in permanence of form, but in continuity of alignment. Submission, therefore, produces resilience. Resilience is not resistance, it is elasticity. It allows the soul to absorb impact without fracture. It permits recovery without bitterness. It enables endurance without hardening. This quality cannot be developed through assertion. It arises only when the soul ceases to contend with life and begins to cooperate with it. This cooperation does not diminish individuality, it refines it. The individual becomes more himself, not less. At this stage, the illusion of defeat dissolves. The individual no longer interprets loss as failure. He no longer equates difficulty with negation. He understands that life advances through transformation, not accumulation. What is relinquished was never essential. What remains is sufficient. Submission without defeat is, therefore, a decisive turning point. It marks the transition from struggle to authority, from reaction to response, from resistance to participation. The soul ceases to be an object acted upon and becomes an agent aligned with purpose. This alignment does not guarantee ease. Life continues to test. Demands remain. Responsibility increases. The difference lies in posture. The individual no longer stands against life, but within it. He is no longer battered by events, but shaped by them. Those who reach this stage no longer ask whether submission is wise. They have tested the alternative and found it wanting. They have learned that resistance consumes strength without producing power, while submission conserves strength and produces clarity. Submission does not end the struggle by removing the challenge. It ends the struggle by removing conflict. Conflict arises only where reality is opposed. When opposition ceases, struggle dissolves. What remains is effort without friction, movement without resistance, and strength without strain. This is not defeat. It is mastery. Life yields nothing to force. It yields everything to alignment. And alignment begins with submission. Chapter 9, The Mature Soul and the End of Fear. Fear does not disappear because life becomes safe. It disappears because the soul becomes stable. This distinction must be grasped, for many imagine that freedom from fear depends upon favorable conditions, certainty of outcome, or protection from loss. They seek safety in arrangements, guarantees, and assurances. When these fail, as they must, fear returns with greater force. Fear ends only when dependence ends. So long as a man relies upon circumstances for security, fear is inevitable. Circumstances change, fail, and disappear. What depends upon them must therefore remain anxious. The mature soul seeks security elsewhere. Maturity is not the absence of trial. It is the absence of illusion regarding trial. The mature soul does not expect exemption from difficulty, nor does it interpret difficulty as a threat. It understands that life proceeds by demand and response, not by protection and indulgence. Fear arises from the belief that the self is fragile. This belief is rarely examined. It is assumed. The individual believes himself to be easily broken, quickly ruined, and permanently damaged by loss. From this belief, fear flows naturally. Life corrects this belief through experience. Repeated exposure to difficulty, when met rightly, proves that the soul endures. Each survival weakens fear's authority. Each recovery reveals that what was thought essential was not. Over time, fear loses credibility. The mature soul no longer accepts fear as guidance. It recognizes fear as a residue of earlier dependence. It may still appear, but it no longer governs action. Decisions are no longer made to avoid discomfort, but to fulfill requirements. This shift marks maturity. The mature soul does not rush. It does not panic. It does not demand certainty before acting. It understands that certainty belongs to outcome, not to action. Action must proceed without it. Such a soul is not reckless. It is measured. It assesses risk without exaggeration and accepts consequences without dramatization. It neither seeks danger nor flees it. It stands ready to meet whatever arises. This readiness dissolves fear. Fear thrives on anticipation and imagination. It magnifies the unknown and projects catastrophe. The mature soul does not indulge these projections. It remains present, attentive, and responsive. Presence is the antidote to fear. When attention is anchored in the present requirement, fear loses its footing. It cannot dominate where action is clear and responsibility accepted. The soul no longer speculates about future collapse. It attends to present duty. This attention stabilizes consciousness. The mature soul does not seek reassurance. It has learned that reassurance is temporary and unreliable. It seeks clarity instead. Clarity does not promise safety, but it provides direction. Direction is sufficient. Fear arises when direction is absent. When the soul does not know how to proceed, it hesitates, and fear fills the vacuum. The mature soul proceeds step by step without demanding visibility beyond the next requirement. Life responds to this posture, not by removing the challenge, but by clarifying the demand. The individual is shown what must be done now, not what will happen later. This is all that is necessary. The end of fear does not mean emotional numbness. The mature soul still feels, it still experiences concern, caution, and awareness of risk. What disappears is paralysis. Fear no longer arrests movement or distorts judgment. This freedom produces quiet authority. The mature soul does not argue with others' fears, nor does it attempt to persuade them. It simply acts from stability. Its presence reassures without explanation. Others sense that it stands on firm ground. Such souls are often mistaken for being protected. In truth, they are prepared. Preparation replaces protection. Readiness replaces reassurance. The soul no longer needs to be shielded because it has learned to stand. This standing is the culmination of discipline. It is not achieved through theory, belief, or affirmation. It is forged through experience, endurance, correction, and alignment. Each stage removes illusion. Each lesson strengthens the foundation. Fear cannot survive this process. It belongs to earlier stages of development, where identity is tied to form and security is sought externally. Once identity is anchored inwardly, fear has no object to attach itself to. Loss may still occur, health may fail, plans may collapse, relationships may end. The mature soul does not deny these possibilities. It simply does not equate them with annihilation. It has learned the difference between change and destruction. This knowledge brings peace. Not the peace of comfort, but the peace of stability. Not the peace of avoidance, but the peace of alignment. It is a peace that remains under pressure and persists through uncertainty. The mature soul no longer asks whether life will be kind. It knows that kindness is not life's function. Formation is. It no longer demands gentleness. It demands truth. Truth ends fear. Fear thrives on illusion. Illusion of fragility, illusion of injustice, illusion of abandonment. When these dissolve, fear dissolves with them. What remains is responsibility. The mature soul accepts responsibility for alignment, response, and conduct. It does not blame fate, circumstance, or others. It does not demand exemption. It stands accountable. This accountability is freedom. Freedom from fear is not freedom from life's demands. It is freedom from the belief that those demands are intolerable. The mature soul knows that it can meet what comes. This knowledge is not arrogance. It is a quiet certainty, born of experience. It does not boast. It does not predict. It simply remains steady. Life recognizes this steadiness. It does not reduce the challenge. It increases trust. The soul is entrusted with greater responsibility, not because it is strong in appearance, but because it is stable in essence. Fear no longer governs such a life. What governs it is law, alignment, and purpose. The soul moves forward without hurry and without dread. It accepts change without collapse and meets uncertainty without panic. This is maturity. Not the end of struggle, but the end of fear. And where fear ends, power begins to act without obstruction. Closing. Chapter. Strength is the only real security. If these words have steadied you rather than comforted you, their work has begun. This teaching is not meant to entertain, persuade, or reassure. It exists to clarify, to strengthen, and to prepare. Those who seek ease will pass it by. Those who seek stability will remain. What has been spoken here is not complete in a single hearing. Understanding deepens only through continued contact, reflection, and application in life itself. Strength is not accumulated in moments, but formed through sustained alignment. If you wish to continue this work, not to escape difficulty, but to meet it with greater firmness, then remain with this channel. Further teachings follow, each concerned not with comfort, but with clarity, not with promise, but with law. They are offered to those who are willing to be formed rather than spared. No obligation is placed upon you. No urgency is required. Remain only if you are prepared to stand more firmly in life, to accept discipline without resentment, and to grow stronger where others retreat. If that intention is yours, continue listening. Life will provide the rest.